This is about making your work more like your life and blending that line so that you're happy to go above and beyond because you're truly passionate about what you're doing. And I think a physical building and a space has a huge component part of what that looks like from an employee experience.
You're listening to Smart Thinking, a podcast from WSP. I'm Matthew Marson, taking you on a journey into smart buildings. In this episode, we're exploring the importance of design and digital services. Joining me today is Tom Hollis, a management consultant who is helping global businesses experiment with new ideas and take them through to scaled products. At present, Tom is focused on the capital markets industry, helping investment banks and asset managers understand where value can be found in a new market of blockchains, crypto assets, and artificial intelligence. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Matt.
So getting to the theme of our podcast today, in your own words, Tom, what is service design?
So I'm going to approach this backwards a little bit and explain first what it isn't and try and debunk a few myths and then come around on my humble offering of a definition. But one of the things we constantly see, particularly with the word design, is that it's about what it looks like. And the best line I've heard on this is design is not about how it looks like, it's how it works. It's practically how a system or a set of services operate together around a true north, which is the user. Equally, particularly in a lot of the consulting world, and I imagine it might be the same in engineering as well, people look at it as a methodology. They latch onto things like design thinking and now design doing as a cookbook of things that you can put together to solve a problem. And it doesn't really work like that. It's much more akin to a set of different lenses that can be applied to a problem when you're trying to explore it. So if you think about how you would solve for a Rubik's Cube, you constantly turn it around in the first instance to look at multiple different sides, multiple different angles to get as deep an understanding of a problem as you can before you solve it. That's how I think about a lot of at least the design principles and the approaches and methods that they use. Now, when you combine those things together, and what I think underpins particularly our interest in design at the moment is really the dogged absolute true north of the user. Everything is built around what the user wants, how the user wants to do it, to what intent or what ambition the user is trying to get to, and how we can help them achieve that. And although that tends to come down with things like, use, and this word use is a difficult one because it tends to get you into, okay, but everyone uses my product. They have to use my product, particularly in a B2B instance, right? Within a company, well, we're not going to think about design because they have to use Outlook or they have to use my email client or whatever. But use actually has some very powerful economic implications. Consistent use is retention, and as we all know, customer acquisition is the most expensive part of customer management. So if you can hold on to them and get them constantly using your product, that has a big impact on both your top and bottom lines. And then equally, if you want to make that very real, you look at Apple, right? There was a meme going around a while ago that compared the new Samsung phone to the new Apple phone. And when you looked at the Samsung phone, it said, well, I had this feature in 2009, I had this feature in 2012, I had this feature in 2014, all these great reasons technically why you would choose a Samsung phone, and the retort was, yeah, but this is an iPhone. Have brand affinity that's been built up over time, and they just do the little things really well. So it can come down to some very tangible, realistic things.
Have you got any good examples of where you think people are getting their digital services wrong?
Yes, lots. I think if I was going to prioritize them, the absolute first one is there's somewhat of an obsession with technology. When we talk about digital, we automatically flip towards talking about new technology. And then in my world, my current world, in investment banking and capital markets, that's all artificial intelligence, that's all big data, that's all now small data as well, apparently, is coming back in. There's distributed ledgers and blockchains, even Bitcoin now we're starting to talk about again. And really, that for me is a symptom of companies looking at the leading companies at the time and seeing lots of technology. They look at Google and they see technology. They look at Apple, they see technology. They look at Netflix in particular, and they see the things they do with distributed computing and having rogue systems that run around and take servers offline to keep the technical team on their toes. And they see all that great stuff and they think, oh, it's all about technology. It's not, Not every company is a technology company. Every company is a digital company. They have to be relevant in a digital environment and a digital customer, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to focus absolutely on technology. And that tends to have a knock-on impact as to how a business tries to approach developing digital services. It means they organize themselves around specific technologies and what can I do with this toy, what can I do with that toy, instead of thinking about where am I going to make money in the future? Through which digital mean can I make, improve a customer's experience or a user's life? How can I improve retention through various digital ways of thinking and the new realities? So that would be the first one, and actually by extension the second one, which is treating things in silo, not looking at the top line. What is the business trying to do, and how can we organize all these tools we have? Yes, but different ways of approaching a problem, not trying to manufacture everything ourselves, but pulling capabilities from outside our business through platforms or marketplaces, or all of those kind of things. And then I think the third one would probably be looking too big. And it's definitely a symptom or a challenge for big companies who are used to operating in global markets, thinking big projects, big scale. They tend to focus on the big. Whereas actually, if you look at some of the guys who really get this right, and it's a small section, it's less than a fifth of companies who are really good at this, but they tend to produce outsized results in terms of revenue uplift. If you look at what they look at when they approach digital services, they look very small. They don't look at big mega trends. They don't look at what the competitors are doing. They don't benchmark themselves necessarily. They don't look at the average customer. They look at the specific customer, the very, very small niches that go underneath them, and they use that, the here and now and the real and the small, to inform how they point their products. And that comes down to my last point, actually, which is most companies really, when you look at it, don't have that level of depth of their user, particularly not at scale. So, we do tend to work with the averages, and I would hazard a guess that the average millennial that tends to pop up in all of our planning and digital strategy sessions doesn't actually exist. No one really sits on that average. There's a massive different varieties and flavors of millennial that you can get. And if you try and aim for the average one, you're probably going to miss all of them, to talk about one demographic in particular. Equally, we don't really test with them. So, a big proponent, particularly in design, is testing early, testing with paper prototypes, and that's a really, a difficult thing for big companies to do who are used, got a brand to defend. They don't want to put something out half-baked, so they're delay, and before you know it, you're 18 months down the line in developing a service, but you still haven't shown it to a user. You've shown it to a couple of employees, maybe friends and family, but they aren't necessarily the user who's really going to power the growth of a product and your top and bottom line. And then I think the final point on that user angle is really most companies haven't switched from a gathering requirements mentality to an understanding and challenging assumptions mentality. We still go in there with our checklist of we think this, what does it need to do, as opposed to trying to understand the user maybe more than they understand themselves in certain guys, to try and think of products, services that a little bit ahead of where the user can really communicate it. There's something in there that there's an intent, there's an ambition that the user is trying to achieve. It's about trying to walk backwards down that journey with them. And if you're going in there looking for requirements for a build, as opposed to understanding why they want to engage with the service, what they're trying to achieve outside of that narrow interaction you have with them, you're going to probably miss a lot of useful stuff.
I wholeheartedly agree. From my experience, when I talk to my clients, it's a case of, well, what technology can I put in the building? Or, maybe I need this gadget for security versus something else to do with the lights, and they don't really think about how it ties together. I asked them, when was the last time you actually spoke to someone that uses your building? Do you really understand what they want, not just the person buying the space? And I think that's caused a lot of the satisfaction gap that people have with the buildings in which they work.
I think actually there's a question I've probably got for you on that. If I look at a lot of the companies I deal with, they've spent a lot of money over the last 10 years now trying to optimize their technology. They're automating as much as they can, moving things to the cloud, they're trying to make the system smart. We're trying to squeeze as much productivity we can out of our technology, but our total productivity line is flat. And if you look across the UK, productivity has been flat for a while. So my hypothesis would be, actually, maybe there's a lot on the human side of things that we've probably underinvested in. How do we improve the productivity of our humans? And that's doubly important if you think that in the future, most of the automaton stuff will be done by machines, and what's left will be traditionally unproductive things like creativity and whatever on the right-hand side. And so we've got a couple of interesting clients who are looking at how they can use their building to do that. And I know you've done, I think, some work on that in the past. How can you reduce sick days? How do you create a working environment that drives towards a productivity line. And companies are now starting to look at that through a very, very strict strategic lens, because they understand that, simply making your machine faster and updating to the latest version of Microsoft isn't necessarily going to deliver those gains that you're really trying to look at, particularly when you're also looking at how do I make people more innovative or more creative or more entrepreneurial, how do I make them happier? Like, how do I attract tech talent, because crikey, Google don't really compete with you on price. They'll compete with you on your quality of life working there. And for a lot of ambitious, driven people, I don't think there really is a work-life balance. It's about making your work more like your life and blending that line so that you're happy to go above and beyond because you're truly passionate about what you're doing. And I think a physical building and a space has a huge component part of what that looks like from an employee experience sort of angle.
What would Tom's top tips for compelling service design be?
So I think the first is be very disciplined with your questions. Most designers will spend almost all their time on trying to understand the problem and a little bit of their time trying to solution for it. There's a Einstein quote, whether it's Einstein or not is a big question on Reddit, but to that effect. And I think you need to ask early, yes, but also ask innocently. Don't go in there with loaded questions. That's a really hard thing to do. And equally, if you're asking early, that is a really uncomfortable thing to do, particularly for a big company. Going in there and looking like you don't know the answer to the question, or looking like you're trying to understand them better, or putting something in front of them that is, an early paper prototype, that is uncomfortable. What we've seen work the best is where you work with either an agency or someone you hire from the outside who's from that sort of environment and from that assumption to help get your people more used to doing that sort of thing, because it is very uncomfortable and you feel very naked in front of a customer. The second one would be don't chase the shiny. Be stylish, not fashionable, and I definitely learned that through the front end experience at the fintech company. And then I guess the latter one is more understand where you're going before you start. Too many people say we need to do something digital, we need to do something with this technology, without walking it back up to a very specific strategic question for their boss or ultimately their company. And even things like improving user experience have a metric attached to them. Is it retention? Is it conversion? Is it activation? Is it referral? Like, point to something particular. And in particular, point to something that's very small and specific, what I would call a leverage point, something that if you lean on a little bit, it's going to have a big impact down the line. And I'll kind of illustrate that point with a really great story from a guy called Dave Trott, who is an ex-ad man, quite famous in the industry. Definitely look him up on YouTube and look at his books, because it's really, really clear thinking. And he tells a story about he was working at Sainsbury's on one of their campaigns, and it was at the time in the UK where you've got Tesco's and Sainsbury's really slogging it out for market share. Sainsbury's had an ambition to grow 3 billion in 3 years, new revenue. And they're thinking, how do we do that through discounts? How do I get 300 billion worth of new people through the door? And they were tackling with a big $3 billion problem, if you want to look at it that way. And one of the junior ads guys in the account said, well, hang on, we have 14 million store visits a week. So surely over a 3-year period, if we just got everyone to spend an extra £1.50 a week, we'd hit the target. And that was brilliant, because you turn a $3 billion problem into a very small, very manageable £1.50 problem. And, not everyone will spend £1.50. Some people will spend a 10 quid. But if you average £1.50, you solve your problem. And because you've looked at the problem through that lens, through a different lens, using some of those design techniques, and you've aimed for something really, really small that sticks with people, that can be measured, that you can anchor a lot of what you're doing around, that makes the thing that comes out the other end, be that a new product, a new service, a new way of doing things, whatever it might be, that much more likely to stick, and that much more likely to deliver something that's going to ultimately contribute to the growth of your business.
Incredible. Service design is something that we're going to use more and more here at WSP as part of our smart buildings offering. And all that remains to be said is a big thank you to Tom Hollis for joining us. Join us in the next episode when we discuss how cloud computing is whipping the traditional building management system into shape. We'll be discussing heating, ventilation, and air conditioning analytics. If something in this episode has piqued your interest, then have a chat with us. Email smart@wsp.com. You've been listening to Smart Thinking, a podcast from WSP. I'm Matthew Marson, and thanks for listening.